Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Ben Hale. Ben Hale is the co-founder of Brite. He currently lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, has three beautiful children, and loves to ski in the mountains close to his house, ride mountain bikes, and vacation in Lake Powell. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Brite, can you give me a breakdown of what it is that you're doing and why it is that's so important to you?
Yeah. So there needs to be a little bit of context to kind of jump into the story of how kind of Bright came to be. So about 4 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage two testicular cancer. So all while I had a 2 month old son, my first son was born, and then I got diagnosed. And so we were kind of already going through all of the confusion of trying to navigate health insurance and like what that looked like, who do I go see, and kind of all that stuff. And the last thing that I really wanted to be thinking about is like, okay, one, am I covered? How do I pay for this? Like, what does this look like? Yada yada yada. So kind of going through that experience, that happened in November, and the company that I was at, we had open enrollment like a few weeks before. And if you've been through an open enrollment before, typically what happens is you have the HR team come up there. There's usually like some account managers from the brokerage that you have, and they hand out a PDF benefit guide or they go through a PowerPoint presentation, and everyone just gets on their phone and is looking at Instagram, or I think at the time, like Candy Crush was big, right? So maybe playing Candy Crush or something like that, right? And no one's really paying attention. And then once that ends, you have this kind of disruptive period where everyone's like, what are you gonna do? Like, I don't know what's going on. What I did, I'll just do what I did last year. What are you doing, right? And it just kind of becomes this mess, and no one really takes away what they need to do for their families or their personal situation or anything like that. And so, fast forward a couple of years, my other co-founder, Landon, he's been in the broker space for benefits for like 10 years. And he's like, there's a massive hole in education and helping people like me and myself, people that don't live in that world and understand that language, like premiums and out-of-pocket maxes and rates and deductibles and all that madness, right? And so, can we put our heads together? You being from the employee side and going through a lot of that stuff, and me being on the broker side, can we put together, a product that is easier for the broker to deploy and helps the employees actually pick the best benefits that are being offered for them, their dependents, their families, etc. And so, we put our heads together, put some stuff down on paper. I come from a product management background, so I'm like, okay, we need a couple engineers, and we can do the design, and we can kind of put this together. So we knew what we needed to, the team that we needed to put together to actually deliver on the product. And so the product that we built is Bright, and Bright is the mission of Bright is to help an employee maximize the value of their benefits, and help them pick and decide on which benefits are best for them and their family. So ultimately, what it is it's an interactive experience with decision support that an employee can go through on their own time on their mobile phone. They can share with their spouse. It translates into other languages, and it helps them decide on their benefits, educate them about their benefits, and then helps them enroll in their benefits as well. And that's, in a nutshell, what we do and our mission to, help employees make better choices.
And how did you discover that this was something that was the best use of your time versus other entrepreneurial pursuits? Because I think every entrepreneur has like a bajillion ideas they want to pursue.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about that today about, I was thinking, am I really an entrepreneur? And I was thinking back growing up, I was like, well, I sold lemonade. I did lemonade stands, and I evolved into cleaning out those big green trash cans. So, take a big thing of Dawn soap and go door to door and ask if people wanted a trash can. I was like, yeah, I think I'm an entrepreneur. So, this one was big for me because again, it was personal, right? And we live in a crazy world, and you have COVID now. You have like all this stuff that's going on, and helping people make those decisions not only on the medical side, but all of the other, they call it ancillary products, but all the other insurance products that can kind of supplement or augment that medical plan to really help benefit someone. um, is important. And the old way of doing things with, those PDFs and the PowerPoints, all that, what it looks like to an employee is like, you're trying to sell me insurance products, right? And I think I asked you, Dave, when we were first talking, like you came from Uber, and they have probably some of the richest benefits in the nation. And you went to go enroll by yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, like it hits you what great benefits you really had, right? And I think that message gets lost, that a lot of these employers are paying a percent of the premiums and really offering kind of discounted benefits to employees. That message gets lost. And as my company gives us medical insurance and whatnot, right? But if you can package it all together, there's a huge value add there to an employee. And they really are benefits, and they're not just like insurance products. And I think that message gets lost in the kind of the current status quo. And so, knowing what I know now, we're just trying to help people really make that determination of like, hey, these are employer paid, benefits that in the event of a catastrophe or even something minor, right? These can help you, in your families, and protect you and your families, and take a lot of the stress and, financial and all of that stuff that comes along with that. So that's we felt like it was the best use of our time, because we were both impacted. Me and my co-founder Landon, we were both impacted in different ways, but it's the same problem.
So you want to bring benefits to these employees, and those are the ultimate people who receive the benefits. But how do you get to these employees through their employers? Like, how have you been tackled the problem?
Yeah, so that's actually been one of the biggest challenges of Brite, right? Is how do we deliver our product in a scalable way, and in a way that really impacts the employee. And that's the ultimate thing. And it's funny, we were talking to some investors the other day and trying this diagram of, okay, if here's the employee and you have all these insurance companies, all the mess that happens in between the election, selection of benefits, and then all the work that goes into that, and then we give them a PDF to like help educate them, like, what is that, right? And so right now, how we're actually going to market with our product is we're going direct to brokers. So every company in the US that offers benefits goes through a broker who's licensed and insured and all of that stuff to sell those types of products. And our Brite is extremely efficient at being able to create these bright experiences and these engagement experiences for employees. So we're going and saying, hey, look, you're doing all of these different tasks to accomplish the task of educating employees. And we can take all of that and combine it into one really cool experience that's, mobile friendly and, translates and does all this really cool extra stuff. And you're going to save time, and you're going to get better engagement, and you're going to make your clients happy. And it's really becomes kind of a no-brainer. So we're going direct to brokers, and that's who we're selling to. And we pivoted to that, through some trial and errors. We tried to go direct to employers and say, hey, you should like buy this and help educate your employees. And they're like, oh, wow, well, let me talk to my broker about it, right? Because everything benefits goes through the broker. And they kind of are the gatekeeper, as you could kind of say. And so we're like, well, let's go after them, and let's see, and they, we've done pretty well at being able to kind of sell it to them as a huge value add to their business, and a cool, new value add that they can bring to their clients. So that's the way that we're taking it to market right now, and actually helping impact the employee. It's going through brokers and brokerages.
If you had to ballpark it, how many brokerages are there in the US? Is it like 10? Is it 100? Is it a million?
Yeah, so there's 1.5 million licensed brokers in the US.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and they manage, all, in Utah alone, there's 45,000 companies that offer benefits. So those 45,000 companies, Utah is the 26th largest economy in the US. So it's like, right in the middle of the pack there. You look at like California, New York, Texas, right? You have giant economies where you have these, massive companies that are offering benefits. And so, we've estimated about 1.5 million brokers in America.
And how do you find these brokers? Is there like a directory of all these brokers you can just like contact?
I wish that would be really nice. Yeah. Yeah, so that's what's been really cool is we've created relationships with some of the insurance carriers, and they're like, hey, I should introduce you to this guy. And so it's actually been really organic in how we've been able to get in contact with these brokers. We have a couple partnerships in place that work directly with brokers on the voluntary insurance side, so like life insurance, and there's a couple other products. And so they're like, hey, they've been introducing us to all of their clients and their brokers that they help serve. And so it's been kind of a networking thing, and it's been pretty organic. And I think what we found is because we're so unique in the market, and there's not really another service like ours. It's kind of, I wouldn't say gone viral in the way that like Snapchat or something like that has, but I think it's really making a wave in the industry because it's so unique and different. And again, we're putting our software hats on and solving problems with software,
Yeah.
and trying to look outside of the status quo. And I think a lot of the other competitors just kind of get sucked into the industry standard of like, this is how we're going to do it. Da, 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 da. And I think what we look at it really different. And we're looking at, this new age of employee, right? You have millennials and Gen Z, and everyone's on a mobile phone. So let's engage people on their phones. And now we have, quarantine and COVID, and everyone's working remote, right? Or even in industries like construction and retail and trucking, and like those industries don't get this type of engagement in a people. Like you're talking about bringing people in on construction sites or trucking. Like, how do you engage those people? Right? And so if we can engage people on their mobile phones that everyone has, now you're talking about a better education experience, something that they can actually go through on their own time, that's not in like a set open enrollment time period, right? They can engage with their spouse. And so I think that's just making such a bigger impact in the way that we're thinking about it and engaging kind of this, not necessarily new generation of employee, but there's just different. We don't learn the same way that we used to.
Can you walk me through the journey of acquiring your first client?
Yeah. So our first client, our first product was just so bad, and it's so funny. You look back, you're like, the UI was bad. It was so clunky. Like, it was so many bugs. And that's one of the scariest parts as an entrepreneur, is taking what in your heart to not be what you want it to be and sell it. And that's like scary. So we had a friend who was a broker, and he's like, yeah, I think this idea is really cool. Let me take it to one of my clients. And so we put together this presentation. He's like, yeah, hey, they want to see it. And so we did this like PowerPoint pitch, which is so just, so lame, and, oversold this like product that was going to help their employees and everything. They're like, yeah, we'll buy it. And we're like, wait, what? Yeah, we want this, like, so it was, that's like one of the scariest steps, I think, too, is taking this really just, MVP product, this where it's not there, where it can be, but like you can't sit on it too long. You have to iterate, and you got to get the customer feedback, and you're not going to get that unless you like have something in the wild. And so it was actually if you've heard of Podium, they're a huge software company in Lehigh, Utah, and they bought it, and we're like, oh my gosh, right? And then we put Podium on our website and like had this thing, and then we started to get traction, right? And the rule of thumb is getting your first customer is the hardest part, right? And we were just, I don't know if it was luck or what, but we were solving a real pain point for them, because they were hiring like 40 to 50 people a month. And if you're hiring that many people, you're talking about onboarding new employees every 2 weeks, and you still have to educate them on benefits. And so they were like, they wanted to use it for that. They didn't even want to use open enrollment. And so like it actually opened up this new use case that we didn't even think about. Like, oh yeah, like what about these giant companies that are hiring people all the time and onboarding new employees, and like the headache that an HR team has to go through to like educate their employees, these new employees, on their benefits and like that whole process. And so like, oh wow. So not only did we acquire our first customer, but then we also got like this new use case that we didn't even think about. Like, oh sweet. So then we, and then we started to get the feedback, and then we got that, that machine turning. And then we were able to, add and iterate and kind of build into like, what Brite is today, which isn't much more, but it's progress, right? And it's, we've acquired a lot more customers, and now we kind of have, a more steady, stable product that we're proud of. And, so that, I don't think acquiring the company was this crazy experience, other than like, you have to just kind of get your product out there, and it's scary. But it pays off to just kind of take that leap of faith.
Do you remember the feature set of the MVP, and how does it differ from today?
Oh man, I like barely remember it. I just remember like we had this horrible pink, no, it was like purple and blue UI that we thought like at the time looked so cool, and the decision tool was really clunky and it was really slow. You kind of go through this set of questions, and then it like spun there for like a couple minutes, and then it finally like spit out this recommendation. And we didn't have a lot of the other education components quite dialed in yet. And like the URL was like this really ugly, like, ID. It wasn't like a vanity URL that we do today. So like there was this huge long number, and like they're like, we're just gonna send this out to our employees and they can log in. I was like, yeah, so like, we have, so anyway, and it was like all that type of feel. Well, like that URL is scary. So like, okay, well, let's make it a vanity URL. That's like better. And then like the branding was really hard to do. So like we wanted to be able to add like the company logo inside of the tool. So they like, hey, this is Podium's benefits for Podium's employees, or company X for, and so like being able to put that in there, like that was a huge game changer for him, because like, oh wow, now it's this white labeled experience. And then, so there was it was bad. It was really bad, and so, but we're solving the problem, and that's really all that matters. And they were willing to pay for it. And it was like, oh, okay, cool. Right. And then that was kind of the momentum that we needed to, start to iterate and build and kind of find new use cases for it.
Is your pricing model back then and your pricing model today like similar in terms of structure, or is it entirely different?
It's totally different. Yeah.
Okay.
So we thought, like our first structure, it was so hard to explain to people. And that was a huge barrier, because we're like, okay, so like you can have like the tool, but then the decision tool is like a buy up, and it's like a per employee per month basis. And they're like, okay, well, like, how do you bill for that? And we're like, hey, we bill on this. And like, it was way confusing. And so we've actually iterated on our pricing structure probably 8 times to what it is today. And I think our product was awesome. And like the pain points you saw, but the pricing model was really one of the barrier to entries. And it wasn't that it was too expensive, or it wasn't that it was like, it was just too hard to understand. And we, going back to kind of the industry thing that we got sucked into, we tried to make it look like another industry product. Like, oh, like that's how they bill, so we should bill the same way. But it didn't necessarily match up, verbatim with what else was doing. So we had to kind of be really creative in how do we simplify it so it's a no-brainer. And so our pricing structure today is way different than what it was when we first launched. In fact, it's almost night and day different.
Can you describe the model of how it works now?
Yeah, so how it works now. So back in the day, it was like $1.25 per employee per month for the decision tool, but they could have all the other stuff. And, but then they had to pay per employee, and it was just kind of a nightmare. It was really hard to explain. And so right now it's like, okay, cool. So for $125 a month, you can use Brite for all your employees up to 500. And then it's another $125 for another 500 seats, and it kind of scales up. And then once they hit a certain level, that price starts to come down a lot. So we're selling to brokers. So brokers are buying seats. Okay, well, I know my book of business is, whatever, 4,000 employees. So that's going to cost me this much. And I don't have to do all that other stuff. So it's been able to scale a lot better, and it's a lot easier to explain. And there is a couple products out there that are priced that way. So it makes sense to them more than the PEPM model that we used to have. Yeah. Because then they're running math in their heads, and we just don't want them to have to do that. We just want to be like, oh, cool. So it makes a lot more sense to them.
You told me earlier that you had a background in product management. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what you learned during those years and how it influences the development of Brite today?
Yeah. So it's funny about my journey into product management is like, so I got into product management probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. And it wasn't really like a real role at the time. Like it was still kind of being discovered. And I still think there's a lot of that going on today. Like, it's kind of adapting and evolving is like what a PM is. And so I was at a software company. They're called Weave. They're out of Salt Lake City, Utah, or Lehigh, Utah. And I started there as a data analyst. Like that was my role as a data analyst. And I like really wanted to get into product management. And so I begged the CTO. I was like, okay, like, let me do it. Like I know I can. Let me prove it to you. And he's like, okay, fine. You can be the PM on the mobile app. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know what that means, but we're going to figure it out, right? So I read books. I like did all these read all the blogs that were out there. Like, I was trying to figure out what that meant to be a PM. And at the time, Weave was pretty small. Like, we didn't have a ton of resources and extra capital to like spend on like different softwares and like a team and everything like that. So I had to be really scrappy, right? So like calling customers and getting product feedback. Like I was just Google Sheets and spreadsheets. Like I was just capturing all that information and data. And it was really scrappy and like launch it. We didn't even really have like a product marketing team. So like I was running all like the product launches and the marketing, and like that was a terrible idea because I'm horrible at it. Right. So like, but what it taught me is you have to be scrappy. And so I took it on myself as like, okay, if I'm the PM of mobile is my company. And you have to set these North Star metrics of like, okay, we're going to get X amount of daily active users. Like that was like the metric. That was what we targeted. So how do we do that? And then coming up with that plan to figure out, okay, we need to just measure this. So as we launch different things, how are we impacting that number of daily active users? Right. And it was just so scrappy. Just, we're using like Google Analytics. We find whatever free program we could find out there to figure out how to do this. And we launched a couple cool features, and sure enough, we were at like 200 daily active users. And then a couple weeks later, we were at like 2,000. Right. So we 10x daily active users. And so looking back on those days early on when we had no resources. Weird. Look at Brite. We have no resources, no real extra capital, right? We don't have any extra engineers to help out. But I look at Brite. It's like we've got a couple engineers, and we have to, figure out how to use them to build the most valuable features, right? We don't have money for software, extra software. I look at Brite now. So it's really about being scrappy and, and just, if you don't know how to do something, you just have to like figure it out. Right. So I'm looking at Brite right now. It's like, I'm the accountant, I'm the lawyer, I'm the sales guy, I'm the onboarder, I'm the support, I'm the everything. Right. And so I don't know how to do any of that stuff. Right. But you just could but neither does anyone else. And I think that's one thing that's really important for entrepreneurs to remember is like, your customers don't know that you don't know. Right. And so like, you can kind of just, you gotta have a game plan, but like they don't know that you don't know like a lot of this stuff, and like that's kind of the fun game of it is like, you get to play all these different roles and things like that, and pretend like you know what you're doing, and most of the time you don't, and that's okay. And so again, just kind of going back, like PM has been a great launch pad into being like a full blown entrepreneur. especially at a small startup, because you don't have support. You don't really have like we didn't have anyone above me. It's like a VP of product. We didn't have like anyone really mentor or guide me. It was really just kind of figuring things out on my own. And I think that's really what helped lay the foundation for confidence of like, okay, like I've been a PM before. I've launched products. I've built them from the ground up. Now I'm looking at Brite. It's like, I've done this before, right? And you can build that confidence of like, I can do this. I can build a product. I can get the customer feedback, right? I can strive for product market fit. And, it may not be initial, but we can work and figure out what it means. I can talk with engineers. That's what I did. I work directly with engineers, so I know their language. I know how they think. I know what we need to do and get early buy-in to like, they have the ownership as well as I do for the success of this product. And so all of those types of skills I'm now leaning on in this role as an entrepreneur, with a team. There's just a little bit more responsibility, but it's all kind of the same, And even as a PM, you got to be a good kind of storyteller and be able to tell the story of why you're building the product, whether that's to the CEO or to the other management team. Is like, hey, why are you making those decisions, right? And you got to be able to tell that story. And it's the same thing I'm doing with investors. It's the same thing I'm doing with customers. It's just, you can tell that story, and and again, those are all the skill sets that I'm leaning on now that I learned in the early days of a small tech startup with no real extra resources to build Brite. And that confidence is coming big in a lot of scenarios.
You mentioned earlier that you spent some time reading books and blogs. Do you have a favorite one that helped you really like level up as a PM or now as an entrepreneur and a leader of a company?
Yeah. So the one that I really latch onto, there's a guy named Nate Walkingshaw, and he's kind of like a local Utah product legend. So he was the chief experience officer at Pluralsight, which is a big company, and he launched he would launch blog posts about it's called directed discovery, right? And it's kind of a product framework of getting engineers involved in product interviews with customers and like the design process and everything like that. And I really latched on to these blogs because one, he's a really good storyteller, he's really good at writing, and it really resonated with me as like, okay, like that is going to be the framework that I'm going to use as a PM to build product, iterate, and all of that stuff. And so he was just posted on Medium. It's Nate Walkingshaw, if anyone's listening here. And he wrote really great articles about, and blogs about how directed discovery works and had all these really great diagrams and things. And so I picked it up really fast because it was really, really well described and the details were good enough that I kind of picked that and just went with it. And, I think had I not found that earlier, I would have struggled a lot more. And so that's, and then I read, Marty Kagan's book. He's kind of like the product guy. I can't remember. He has a couple of books, and Good to Great. And there's a couple by, Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor that I read that were really good about product. And, that nothing crazy. It was, I think the book that jumped out at me the most was Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, which is a Nike story, right? And what was funny about that one, and that's like my favorite book ever. And one of the things that he says in kind of the end is like, listen, we got lucky. And I think that's like a huge part about entrepreneurship is you just kind of got to get lucky sometimes. And, but like listening to these, these business leaders and these successful companies, like early on, they didn't know what they were doing either. Like really, like they were just kind of like making it up like that, And so I think that really resonated with me as like, hey, like we don't all have it figured out at the beginning. whether like we've changed our pricing 8 times. It's like, oh, well, they did that too. Like, that's okay. That's, you don't have to have it all figured out right at the gate, and things can adapt and adjust. And so, but I don't really know where I'm going with it, other than like, there's a lot of different influences, right? And it started kind of with this, and, read a bunch of books, and it all kind of, it all kind of compounds on each other to kind of help lead to where I am today. So, but directed discovery, I think, was probably the biggest impact early on in kind of my journey.
I just picked up Shoe Dog this past week, so now that I've heard
Okay.
another praise for it, I look forward to going through it.
Well, I will have to reconnect when you're done, and talk Shoe
Okay.
Dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you discover all these things? Like, did you just like Google for like how to be a PM, how to learn these certain skills, or like did you have someone who guided you towards resources?
Um, yeah, it was a lot of that, a lot of
Okay.
Google, like I said, I don't want this to sound in a negative way, but I looked for like a mentor, like, oh, I really need like someone to kind of take me under their wing and like help me. And I feel like if you were looking for that, you know, you might be let down. Like,
Hmm.
I was like trying to find someone that was going to take me under their wing, and like I didn't really. I think that was like I had expectations of what that looked like in my head, and what that really looks like in reality. I don't think those matched up very well, right? So in my head, a mentor, like, I don't know, like some Hollywood movie where um, I don't know what the movie is off the top of my head, but some like some Hollywood version of like some mentor like taking me under their wing and like training me to be this great product manager. And uh and I think at some point I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna figure it out on my own, because I don't think there's really anyone out there that's going to teach me or help me. And so I'm just gonna figure it out on my own. I think when I flipped that switch is when things really changed for me. Is like,
Hmm.
I'm just I'm just gonna figure it out. And I'll look for resources online as kind of just more of like an outline, as opposed to like gospel, and look more at the spirit of the law as instead of the letter of the law. And I think that's really where things started to get a lot better for me mentally. It's just like, you know,
Hmm.
I know what's best for what I'm doing, and no one can really tell me that, because they're not in it every single day like I am. And so, I didn't have any what I would call like a mentor or a coach or anyone like that. I just kind of figured it out, but I didn't look for it. And I
Hmm.
think once I figured out that like that expectation in my head wasn't going to be met, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to do it on my own. And again, I think that made a huge difference for me. I'm not saying that should be for everybody, but um, for me, that my mental and what I was like, it's fine, I'll just figure it out.
One of the beauties of unstructured domains like product management and entrepreneurship is the fact that like one person's experience will definitely could work out incredibly well. Anyone else can follow the exact same footsteps and get a very different result in a different niche or domain. So yeah, definitely you have to be willing to listen to a lot of people, but make your own judgment calls at the end of the day. Because you're right, you are the one in the seat. You are the one who sees things from a perspective that no one else sees.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly right. And I think you said it perfectly. Like, everyone's journey is just going to be different. And like, we're I don't know if I mentioned this. So Brite is actually, we got accepted into Y Combinator. So we're going through that right now, and even in that kind of that those batches, right? Everyone's journey is just different, right? So I now have kind of this inside view of all of these companies going through a similar journey, right? But their products are different, their markets are different, their customers are different. Everything's just like a little bit different, even though we're all going through this startup journey, right? Just everything's a little bit different, right? And I think that's where, like, Phil Knight's like, there's a lot of luck involved, and there's just a lot of variables that the market right now is just different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years
Hmm.
ago. That's a variable, right? There's just a lot of different things, and so you can't. I think expectations have to be tempered a little bit, as you make this journey of like, the goal should be there, but how you get there is going to look completely different than someone else. And I'm discovering that myself, right? Like obviously like, hey, like at the end, I'd love to have a nice big exit, and that's what I want to do. And but that might not happen in 4 years. It might take 8. It might take 10. There might be some rough years there. It's just you have to have those expectations, a little bit tempered, because the journey is just different.
Do you have certain rituals or practices that you apply to help you become or stay and become adaptable? Become
Uh, yeah. So I think one of the things that's helped me a lot is just the balance in life. So I've got 3 kids. I try to wake up early and go to the gym. Like that's one of the first things I do. So being up early and being able to like kind of go and get my mind right in that kind of setting. And that could be, I mountain bike some mornings. I, maybe go for a run or, some sort of thing. That I think that really helps. But getting up early, I think, is one of the biggest things. And the reason that I think that is because then you can adapt for the day. So if you're waking up a little bit late and the day's already started, that's when I find myself to get all out of whack. And it feels like the train, as like all the cars have just like jammed together, and I feel really overwhelmed by all of the chaos. So getting like a good start to the day, waking up early, going to the gym, being home by like, 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., depending on kind of when I get up, and then being able to like sit down and plan things out, and being able to like, you have a little bit more time, because time is what kills you, right? And
Mhm.
so being able to have that time to just kind of process, sit down, think, that's really helped me be adjustable to the changing variables and everything. And that may be a really small thing, but it really helps me. And I think everyone, in that spot, just needs to find what works for them, right? So I try to be done. I typically start at about 8 a.m. and I usually go to about 5 or 6 p.m. And then I'm so burnt out by Zoom calls and meetings and everything that like I don't want to look at my computer again, right? But I do have my phone, and that's like something I want to break at some point, is like being able to just like throw my phone into the backyard and then just go find it like at night, like when the kids are in bed, because I do look at my phone a lot, which is not a good thing, but I feel like I'm gonna miss something, and like that's been really hard. Is like that anxiety of like, well, if an email comes in from an investor or a client or a customer, like I'm the only person that can look at that, so I've got to be just like on top of it, refreshing email and stuff like that. And that's like the worst habit that I picked up. Um, but just kind of having that balance, finding like that ritual in the morning really helps me to just be able to take on the day and have the time to process what I need to do that day to
Hmm.
come out at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. feeling like, okay, I'm set up for success the next day.
How much time do you commit to the planning process in a given morning?
It depends. I've had days start like East Coast, like 9 a.m. is 6 a.m. here. Sometimes some parts of the year. So like I had like a 6 a.m. call. So you know I don't take a ton of time to process. I open up my calendar, quickly kind of game plan in my head. And once I've been at this a while now, so it's like, okay, I kind of know what that day is going to take and the things that I can look at and figure out. At the beginning, it might have taken me a little bit more because I would stress about, demos and sales calls and all that stuff. But now I've been in it long enough that that doesn't really bother me as much. Right now, it's like investor calls. It's like, oh, like those kind of stress me out a little bit, right? So it's just kind of like, you know, once you kind of get into it and you figured out what your process is and you get the confidence and things like that, I think, it just kind of depends on what those challenges you're taking on are. At first it might be getting customers. So sales
Hmm.
calls are stressful. Like, hey, we gotta like get customers, right? Or hey, we've got a product that we need to release. What does that look like? What do we need to do? What are like the quick off the top of my head checklist items that we need to do? So I think that list depends, and it's not always the same. Like Fridays are pretty light for the most part on some things, but like Monday through Thursday, it's like I mean, it's just solid blue columns on my Google Calendar from like 8 a.m. to 6, and it's like, got to take a deep breath and find times to kind of cool down. So it just, I'm blabbering on here, but like it just depends on what the challenges are that you're facing that week or that day, what you're comfortable with, what you're not comfortable with, that you need a little more prep for, and those things I think will, shift and adjust as you move forward kind of in the journey of your company.
Do you find yourself able to disconnect from the stress and the urgency of work on the weekends?
A little bit. Saturdays are pretty good. Like I try to do something every Saturday that I enjoy, like play golf or go mountain biking or go to the pool with my kids. I try to do something that I have to like be engaged in. Um, and then like Sunday nights is kind of when it picks back up. I'm like, will I go into kind of like planning and like execution mode again? But it's been hard. It's been a challenge for me. Like I'm the CEO and I'm the co-founder, and there's a lot of pressure to like, I don't want anything to slip through the cracks. And I think that like stress and anxiety is what keeps me up at night. And like sometimes I'll wake up at like 3 a.m. and be like, oh shoot, we've got to do that, right? Or like, if we build this product, or if we do this, or we do that, right? Like, so like that happens every week. Like I suck at sleeping now. I used to be great. I'm not a good sleeper anymore, right? Because I wake up.
I feel you.
and then your brain starts going. You're like, oh man, it's like 2 a.m. It's like I got to get up in 4 hours, right? So I go to the gym and whatever. So I think I hope one day that goes away, but I'm not very good at that. Like I need to figure out a better way to like disconnect from work, and I haven't figured that out yet. So if anyone who's listening or anyone has any tips on that, I'd love to hear it, because I still have that anxiety that something's going to slip through the cracks, or something's going to miss, or a client's going to be upset and I'm not going to be able to know how to handle it. Something's just stupid, right? Like I don't really need to worry about that stuff, but I do. Yeah, I do.
How big's your team right now?
There's just 4 of us.
Okay.
Yeah, there's just 4 of us. So we have 2 engineers and then like 2, me and my other co-founder Landon. We're kind of like the business sales like end, and so it's just there's plenty of us to work, but it's just, again, I feel a responsibility to just keep everybody motivated and going, and is everyone okay, and things like that. So I feel like there's I don't know, I take that on myself, and maybe that's keeps me up at night, but I think that's just part of the job sometimes.
Are there things that you know now that you wish you knew called 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. This is hard. I think I don't want to say it's all up to be cracked. It's not all what it's been cracked up to be, because I love working for myself. I love like everything that I do impacts either my financial future or my company's future, or like everything I do is creating value for what I own. And I think that part is really big, coming from like other companies, like where you're kind of working for the man a little bit. And I think that, but it's hard. And I don't think I understood how many little things there are, like, oh, we got to start payroll. Like that took like 3 days. It's like time we didn't really have. And like we got to like figure out medical insurance, and like we got to take care of the team. We got to like pay them. We got to like, we got to figure out a place to work. And we got to buy monitors, and like there's just like all these little things that like you don't really take into account when you haven't done it before. And then like I'm still learning a lot about like the VC world a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, I'll be totally honest. Like there's like a lot of jargon and lingo that I'm still kind of picking up and learning, and so that stuff's all really new. And I don't know if like it's hard to be in that world though when it's not really relevant to you as much. And so, I just wish I had known a little bit more about that prior. Just like, okay, what does it look like? What does it mean to raise a seed round? What does it mean like a Series A? Like, what does that really
Hmm.
mean? Like, what's a valuation? What's a price valuation? What's a safe? Like, just kind of it's like normal basic stuff. That's stuff all I had to learn. Like going through it. So, uh, just have a little bit more knowledge around some of the basic stuff would have been pretty helpful actually. But
Okay.
it's also fun to be scrappy and kind of figure it out.
Definitely. I love it.
Yeah.
So the second to last question I have for you is, what advice would you give founders or early stage founders or soon to be founders that are watching this episode?
Um, yeah, so there are a lot of the advice I always tell myself is listen, there are people that have done this that are probably weren't as capable as you are and they figured it out somehow. And if you've already made the step, you're probably smart enough to have a company, build a business, be an entrepreneur, be a founder, whatever. You can figure it out too, right? And I have to tell myself like, okay, right? I feel like imposter syndrome all the time because I'm like, I'm just a nobody and nobody knows who I am, and like that's fine. And I feel like sometimes, it's I feel a little under equipped sometimes, and I think everyone is feeling that. Some people just hide it a little bit better, and I think that's my advice is like it's okay to feel that way because everyone else kind of does at one point, and you got to push through. Like if you need to make a decision, I'd say sleep on it first. Like give it some time, take the emotion out of it, sleep on it, and then if you wake up feeling the same way, then that's probably the direction you should go.
And the last question I have for you is, what's the best way for our viewers to get in touch with you or follow you along your journey?
Yes. So a lot of our market, we've actually picked up a lot of on like the LinkedIn. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, it's just Ben Hale. Um, or you can search Brite, Brite. I do have a Twitter. I don't post a lot on Twitter. We're posting mostly on LinkedIn because that's where a lot of our customers and clients are. So if you want to follow me, add me on LinkedIn. We can interact there. Again, it's just Ben Hale, and the company is Brite, Brite. The URL is getbritehr.com. And that's the best place to follow us, and we can hopefully learn together and vibe and bounce ideas off each other. I love if you follow me.
Sounds good. Well, thanks again for your time, Ben.
Hey, thank you, David. Appreciate you having me on.